Morning, everyone. Britt Simon here. How are you doing? Happy good morning to you, and happy Saturday, and happy weekend. Happy. So let's talk about some DV lottery news. I see a few of you are already in there saying good morning. That's nice. Thank you. Let me just quickly address a couple of developments from this week. It would be kind of interesting to cover those things first. So this week, for those of you that don't know, we saw kind of an interesting thing happen where in the Federal Register, the government published the new rule with regard to DV 2027 and beyond for the passport rule. Now, we've discussed this before. The passport rule was introduced once before by the government in the first Trump administration. And they actually didn't follow the process. They did not go according to the Administrative Procedures Act, APA. They just rolled out the law without any process. And that is actually what eventually a smart lawyer used to take that rule down. So for a couple of years, we had DV lottery, where it was required that you entered that you said you had a valid passport at the time of entering, and if you didn't, you would later get disqualified, right? And so they're reintroducing that rule essentially, but they're making it a bit more robust this time. So they're going to, not only are you going to put your passport number as they did before, but you're also going to have to take a photo, or they call it a scan in the rule. You're going to have to take a photo of your passport biometric and signature page and include that as part of your application. This will only be for the principal applicant. It won't include derivatives unless, of course, one of those derivatives has their own entry into the process as well. And then they will be the principal on their own entry. So this is confirmation of what we've known. I've discussed this in videos before. I think that you should probably all be aware by now that the passport rule was coming. But it was interesting to see it published this week, and a couple more details sort of came from the announcement. Probably one of the sort of most important things that some of you have leapt onto is that the rule is effective from April the 10th of 2026. So it has a 30-day waiting period after the rule is published. That's part of the APA that they actually failed to do the first time round. And so they're trying to follow the process a little bit more correctly this time. Hopefully they've done everything correctly. And so they've given that themselves that there was a period of time when they took public comment on this new rule. They've justified the new rule in various ways to cut down fraud and so on. And they've also assessed the impact of this new rule. How much would it cost people to get a passport in the various countries? They talk about how they've calculated the average cost of a passport and so on. And so this is how a new rule should be introduced. They should take public comment. They should consider the impact. They should weigh up the pros and cons. And then when they make their minds up, they should then publish that rule with some notice period. They didn't do any of that in the first attempt to roll out this rule, and so now they're doing it again. Okay, so it'll be effective from April 10th. Some of you have leapt on that date and decided that's when the DV 2027 will open, and I wouldn't go quite that far. I don't think it'll open necessarily on that exact date. But I think what that means is that will clear the way for the lottery period, the entry period, to open. So it's unlikely that we'll see the period of entry open before this rule is published, right? Why would they do that when we know that they want to get the passport rule in there? And we've seen the mock-ups of the new entry form with the passport rule and the $1 fee. Both of those mock-ups have been available for some time, and I've talked about that and shown those mock-ups in previous videos. So we know this rule is coming. It'll be available from April 10th to the government to implement, and so after the April the 10th, that's when they could run the entry period. They may decide to announce the entry period ahead of April 10th. That would be okay, as long as they don't start the entry period until April 10th is met. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. Second thing, just if you've been keeping an eye on this data, you know by now that we can't tell very much from the data, but we can tell when a region gets to an else. We can see when regions get to an else. And I can tell you that this week, which is pretty late, there were 75 to an else added this week. Now, I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, that all of those went to Ankara. You can actually see, and I can show you the numbers. Yeah, here's the numbers. I was just looking at them this morning. So there were 6 of 75 went to Asia region cases, and another 69 went to EU region cases. And these EU cases started at case number 12,260 and went up to case number 15,057. Sorry, I scrolled past it. 15,057. Okay, so that block of numbers, in my opinion, is clearly Ankara. And the number of to and else is kind of important. I've explained before, when we see embassies setting their capacity, they don't say their capacity is 63 or 57 or some number like that. They say their capacity is 50 or 70 or 100 or some round number. And obviously 75 isn't a round number, but it's 3/4 of 100, right? So it's one of those numbers that that you would imagine someone saying, yeah, we can take a few more interviews, we'll take 75 more. All right. So it's clearly a single embassy, and I know that to and else have gone to Ankara this week. So that's why I'm certain, 99% certain anyway, that those interviews all went to Ankara. Now, what does that mean? It means Ankara asked for 75 more interviews to be conducted in April. They had already taken a batch of interviews around about the 20th of March, 20th of February rather, which were for April, and now this is sort of them adding on and taking an extra 75. So it shows that Ankara are trying to keep up with their, with their work, but also because we can see that cut off at 15,000, it means that they're 5,000 behind, even though they're obviously putting in a great effort. So there is a bit of a backlog at Ankara, but I can tell you, people at Ankara must be much happier this year than Turkish selectees were in previous years, because Ankara has not been performing well for some time, and it gets a lot of selectees. It gets a lot of work to do. Okay, so that's another piece of news that I thought you'd like to hear about. And the last piece of news that we need to discuss is the lawsuits. Red Eagle Law closed their registration period for their lawsuit, and I think they're planning to file, I think it's even today or tomorrow. And then the Impact Litigation lawsuit is the only group lawsuit that I'm aware of that is available to DV lottery selectees. That closes today. Okay, now it's 9:41 in the morning in California, and so it's 12:41 on the East Coast of America. So you have a few hours. I don't know the precise deadline, but you have a few hours if you haven't joined a lawsuit yet, and if you feel you want to. The only available lawsuit, that you have available is the Impact lawsuit, and this is your last chance to get on that bus. There's no point in asking about registration tomorrow or Monday or next month. This is the last time that you can get onto that lawsuit. Okay, there won't be a second bus. So don't ask me questions. There's no time to go back and forth with questions. Now you've got to, there's a famous saying, you got to shit or get off the pot, right? And now is the time to do that, right? You either decide to just let whatever happens, or you decide that you want to participate in this lawsuit. That's your decision. You have to make that decision, and make that decision now in the next couple of hours, literally in the next 2 or 3 hours. And if you want to be on the Impact Litigation lawsuit, the fee for that is $750. That's the only fee you'll pay. You don't pay fees later on. couple of quick things. It won't guarantee you anything. It's not going to guarantee you a win. It doesn't guarantee you priority over other non-plaintiffs, but it might cause a win. It's possible that it causes a win for only plaintiffs. What else? Everything else is just nonsense at this point. Like, don't ask trivial questions like, how will they communicate with me? I've had a frustrating conversation with someone this week who I told him, stop asking me questions. The lawyers have made their email addresses available on their video channels, right? The Impact are more than happy to answer questions. There's an email contact form on this lawsuit, but Charles Cook and Jesse Bless have both publicized their email addresses. So stop asking me to ask for them, right? It's been a bit frustrating this week when people won't get off their asses and do a little bit of work for themselves, right? So if you have a question, you should have asked that already of Charles Cook and Jesse Bless directly, and you had their emails, you had availability to their emails. If you didn't have that, it's because you're too lazy to figure it out, right? But honestly, let's be honest, that's exactly what the situation is, right? If you keep expecting somebody else to do your work for you, you're going to end up being disappointed at some point, because I am not your secretary, I'm not your personal assistant, I'm not an AI, I'm a real human, and I've got things to do. Right. So, if you are still asking questions at this point, then you blew it. That's your fault. So sorry, I'm just, being so blunt, but honestly, you've had plenty of time to figure this stuff out. So that will close today. And, that's going to be, I hope that will prevail. There was something I was going to show about that, and it slipped my mind with my rant. I'm sure Confusion, if he's on rant time, there you go. I knew I was going to see that particular comment from that particular person. Thank you, Confusion, for making me realize everything is well with the world. So anyway, that's good. Oh, and and yes, we're still at war, by the way, and we're still behaving like a bunch of fools. But anyway, there you go. All right, so I think that's probably all I wanted to cover. Let's take some questions. If you've already sort of posted questions, you may want to repost those. Please update about pause 75 countries. There's no real update about that. The pause is still in place. The 75 countries are unchanged. Now it's a matter of the lawsuits, whether those lawsuits can prevail or not, right? And so, you have to figure that out. Actually, let me show you something I did this week. Let me do it on this tab. Actually, I'll bring it across. I want to show you a particular response. I thought the response was kind of important to understand. Let me see if I can find it, and I'll show you the response. Somebody asked me a question, and I want to, let's see, ask questions here. I want to show you what I said in terms of what the lawsuits could achieve, right? Excuse me, let me just do this. This is kind of, I would like to do this. I would like to show you this particular response. So let me find that. I think it's worth showing you. And I didn't. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, so I was asked by someone. Let me show you their question. You'll understand the context a little bit better. But the question was, I understand the question was from Cindy. Thank you, Cindy, for this question. I understand no one can really predict if or when the DV26 pause will end. However, I was wondering about the lawsuits currently in progress. If there is an early court decision, for example, a preliminary injunction, would that likely mean that the pause could end around April, or is that too optimistic? And then a little bit of context. So let me just go through my answer to that. Right. Specifically, Cindy was saying, could the lawsuits achieve a PI, which is a preliminary injunction, about in April. So I said, once the lawsuits are filed between now and the end of this month, the court will determine how long the government have to respond. It could take between 30 and 60 days. A PI is unlikely, therefore, before that timeline. So April is likely too optimistic, right? So if the lawsuits are filed, Curtis is going to file his lawsuit now. That means about mid-April at the earliest, we could expect some sort of answer from the government. But it's more likely to be towards the end of April. And I think it's unlikely we would achieve a PI through either Curtis's lawsuit or Impact's lawsuit before the end of April. That was my first discussion. But then the next part I think is important for people to understand, because many people ask questions about whether only plaintiffs will get relief or whether others will benefit too. And so I wanted to sort of spell that out a little bit. And I must admit, I think this makes clear my leaning on this has modified over time a little bit because of the government's behaviour in other lawsuits, frankly. So I say, however, the government may, once they receive the lawsuits, decide that they would rather remove the pauses. The chance of that looks reduced given the way the government are fighting the 75-country pause for non-DV cases. There's other lawsuits about the 75-country pause, and the government are fighting that. They seem to be fighting their position that they should be able to implement this pause. The government don't like to lose power, and so they sometimes fight in order to maintain the power they perceive they have. They're particularly prickly around the government's 212F travel ban type authority. They get very prickly around that. The 75-country pause was not a proclamation by the president, but nevertheless, they seem to be sort of fighting it. So much so, they're drafting in more senior lawyers to argue on that case. So that's kind of interesting. But my first point was, it's possible that when they see the DV lottery pause lawsuits, they say, you know what, we can't justify that. Let's just remove the DV lottery pause. And maybe they also drop the 75-country pause. But the DV lottery pause, I think, of the two, is the more arbitrary, the more capricious, and therefore the easiest to drop, or the hardest to defend. That's, in my opinion, that's kind of, at least with the 75-country pause, they put a justification for the logic out there. Whereas the DV lottery pause really had no justification. It was just nonsense, right? It's Christy Nome's, nonsense. And there'll be no administrative record. There'll be no background discussion that happened about that. So I think of the two pauses, the DV lottery pause is probably easier to remove than the 75-country pause. But the lawsuits are challenging both those things, right? So the government might say, yeah, you're right, we'll remove the pause. That's one possibility. If the government decide to fight, I go on, a court may grant a PI, preliminary injunction, but if they were to do that, the PI would most likely only apply to named plaintiffs, right? Not everyone. Neither of the two lawsuits is fighting for a class, they're only fighting for the plaintiffs, right? Now, what do I mean about that? Firstly, what's a PI? What's a preliminary injunction? And a preliminary injunction or an injunction is an instruction from the court to a party to say, stop doing what you're doing. You must not do that. It's not necessarily the end of the lawsuit, but it's like stopping them causing the harm, causing the damage while the lawsuit continues, right? So it's a sort of an immediate action where the harm could be stopped. What would be the harm being stopped in this case? Well, the pauses, right? So the PI could be announced, it could be agreed by the judge, and the judge would therefore instruct the government to stop the pause behavior. They would therefore have to continue with those adjudications that they're going through, etc. And the people that were on 221G would hopefully be, would be issued from that point, right? Now, that's what a PI is. However, the PI, if granted, would only, the court's jurisdiction, unless they're asked to certify a class of people being a group of people who are not necessarily named plaintiffs on the lawsuit. unless they're asked to certify a class, they will only issue an order that affects that class effectively. That's a little bit of a misstatement, but I'm just trying to make this a little bit simpler to understand. I'm not trying to predict every single logical outcome of a lawsuit. I'm just trying to draw the broad strokes here of what could happen, right? So please don't come at me with your first year education on lawsuits and law degrees, etc., and tell me I'm wrong. Please don't do that. I'm not interested. It's like, I'm not interested in legal arguments. I'm just trying to paint a picture here to people that don't understand, necessarily how the lawsuits work, right? So the PI may come from the judge after the government has had a chance to respond and so on. A PI may be granted, but I think we're probably looking at May for that, May timeline for that. Maybe late April, but more likely May, right? And it's by no means certain that we get a PI. But if we don't get a PI and we're left with a normal lawsuit takes too long for them to stop the harm here, which is why we need a PI, right? So essentially we need that. And that should probably come, if we win the arguments in the lawsuits, that would come around about May, let's say, right? But it would specifically only apply to those named plaintiffs, and that's the risk if you choose not to be on either of the lawsuits, right? Now, the government, faced with that PI, have then got a problem. They have roughly, let's say, a few hundred cases through Curtis's lawsuit, and a smaller number on Impact's lawsuit. But let's say there's 1,000 people that basically have to be adjudicated. It's difficult, it's complex for them to weed out those 1,000 people in all of the embassies where they might be, and say to those embassies, hey, you better issue that one and this one and this one. It's 1,000 people. It's not like 5 people. It's not like 10 people. It's going to be about 1,000 people, right? And it logistically, it's quite an effort for them to do that and to say, hey, everybody else is going to stay on the pause, but for these 1,000 people, we're going to have different behavior. And then we're going to issue the visas, and those people will be allowed to enter the USA. It's logistically, it's difficult. And so faced with that PI, the government could have a second point of decision where they say, you know what, it's too difficult to implement this PI, for some people, and then not do anything for others. And so again, we're going to remove the pauses, right? We've been told by the government, by the judge, that we have to remove these pauses. And in theory, anybody else could then take that judgment and they could have a private lawsuit of their own. It would be much more expensive, but they could start a private lawsuit of their own using that judgment as a reason why I wasn't a plaintiff on that case, but now I'm suing you directly. It will cost you several $1,000s to do that. If you want to do this, it's a high risk way of doing things if I were you. But you could try and get the same win for yourself privately that the group lawsuit had just achieved for that group, right? Bad strategy, in my opinion. I'm not suggesting you should do this, and it would be much more expensive for you to do that. But technically it's possible, right? You might, once that judgment has been won for some people, other lawsuits could come at the government. And again, they're not going to enjoy fighting every one of those lawsuits. Remember, every time they're sued, they have to go into court with a group of lawyers, and they have to put effort into that and do all sorts of work. And at some point, they're going to get sick of fighting lawsuits where they're losing all the time. And they would, in my opinion, they would possibly just give in and say, okay, we're removing the pause for everyone, which is what I say in this next text, right? Now, for Cindy, in her particular case, she had a job opportunity, or I think her husband did, in America, a waiting job opportunity. It's like, and she's from, I think, France, where $750, that's not a lot of money over there, 650 euros or something. It's not a lot of money, right? It honestly isn't. Some of you are probably horrified at the costs. I get that. But if you live in France, this amount of money is not a lot of money, right? So I then, for that particular person, I recommend that they should probably be on the lawsuit. They should go to the Impact Litigation lawsuit and sign up on that one. That was what I suggested to Cindy, and I think she was grateful for the advice. I don't know whether she said thank you for the very clear answer. Very clear. See that very clear answer I just gave. Such a child. Anyway, so that's something that you can follow that same thought process. So I've been asked to sort of explain why I sometimes sort of hedge between it may apply only for plaintiffs or it may include benefit for others, right? These lawsuits. That's because I think the government's reaction to the lawsuits may be to remove the pauses, but it's not because I believe the lawsuit will directly achieve a win for everybody, because they're not going for a class, right? And that is fundamentally different to what happened in DV 2020. In DV 2020, Jesse Bless was the main lawyer responsible for the Gomez plaintiffs, and in that case, they achieved a class certification, and they had a small number. I think it was 11 plaintiffs, DV lottery plaintiffs, who were representatives. They were sort of chosen to be representatives of everybody else. And the court in the end did certify the class, and Jesse Bless was made responsible for that class, which covered everybody. Okay, there were some people who were then in private lawsuits, and those people were handled as well. But the main point is that non-plaintiffs as well as plaintiffs did achieve a result, right? And they were in the DV 2020 cases. About 7,000 visas were issued in a very short period of time, less than 4 weeks, because Judge Mehta instructed the government to do that, and the government then did an amazing job. They worked super hard. I have to say, for those of you that suggest that the government won't sort of do what the judge says, you're not really paying attention. They in the past they have shown that yes, they will do exactly what they're told. The departments will. So yes, we've got a much more lawless administration than we had then. That was still Trump, but most other people were behaving more sensibly. Now, yes, they are a bit more lawless. They are a bit more stupid, frankly. But nevertheless, when they're instructed by a judge to do something specifically, they do it. And even in recent other cases, they do it. Okay. So, all right. So those were the things I wanted to go through and just explain to you. Hopefully that was useful. Yeah, this is the sort of thing that's driving me nuts, right? Hi, Simon. I couldn't reach anyone for the impact case from their side. I want to participate in the case, but I want to know if they've reached the sufficient number. I couldn't reach Charles either. Okay, so look, stop it. Stop your silly childishness, right? You're in a situation where you don't know the number. I published the number this week. Jesse gave me the number that they were early in the week, and I think it was 95. Jesse did a video with me last week, and promised to follow up with the number, and he did that on I think it was the Monday, and I published it on the Monday. He was 95 at that point. It's certainly above 100, but you're still asking bloody questions on the last day of registration about whether they've reached the sufficient number. If they don't reach the number and they don't file, you'll be refunded. So why are you asking about whether they reach the number or not? It's completely irrelevant. You're just wasting your own time, okay? And frankly, this sort of thought process makes no sense. So you need to stop with that silliness, right? Really, this is just silly. If you think it through, you know it's silly. They either file or they don't. In reality, as I've been saying for weeks, they will file, right? They gave us the bloody number. They will file. They gave us the number that they had achieved the other day. And I always expected them to get a number of people registering in the last few days. So they were already at 95, and they said they would file as long as they had 100. They were at 95 on Monday. So stop it with the, I don't know if they've reached the number. If they don't reach the number, you get your money back. If they don't file, you get your money back. So why are you asking? This is silly. You need to stop asking silly questions and stop wasting the time of the lawyers, and frankly, your own time and my time in this silly thought process. You need to stop it and decide, am I going to be on this lawsuit or not? If you don't want to be on the lawsuit, that's fine. You're just going to accept whatever happens next. But if you do want to be on the lawsuit, stop with the silliness. Stop whining about transparency. When Chuck does a live video every Wednesday, I don't think he did last week, but he did one the week before, and he discussed this case. Stop whining about these things. Honestly, you're whiners. And I don't know how the lawyers deal with it. People admire my patience at times, and I lose my temper with some of you at times. But how the lawyers deal with people who just ask illogical, silly questions like this one, Bertini 85. Sorry to be so blunt, but it's just illogical. Your thought process is daft. So stop. Stream is buffering. That's not good. I'm hoping that you're getting. Let me just check if greetings. Yeah, Joe from Switzerland. So anyway, stop spamming. Yeah, stop spamming, please. Yeah. All right. Other questions then. What if my passport is biometric plastic but has no signature? No passport in my country has signature. It doesn't matter. When they say take a picture of the biometric and signature page, that you're going to take a picture of that particular page. It doesn't matter what's on there as such. It's not that they need to see the signature. They need to see that biometric and the details page. And there's only one page, I think, in most passports. I think there are going to be different passports that maybe split the information onto two different pages or something. But there's only really one page that matters. They haven't worded that very well in the instructions. Yeah, like as you're saying, how some countries have height, eye color, and other countries don't. Yeah, I know. But it's the main page that, and we'll clarify this. We'll get, bear in mind the rule has been issued, right? The instructions are not issued yet. The instructions for the DV27 are not issued yet, but they will be prior to the entry period. And so we'll get a bit more clarification. So don't worry about that. Okay. Okay. Why do I have badge 3? I don't know. Hi, Simon. Glad to catch you here again this week. You're welcome. Greetings, Uncle B. I love that people call me Uncle. Hope your wife is improving. Yes, she is. Thank you. Please, is Cameron eligible for the DV lottery? Yes. Connection is fine, says Lucas. Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate it. If parent wins but son is aged out, we say results in December, but son turned 21 in September. Is son protected by CSPA? Could we get results faster than the usual 5 to 7 months? It starts in April, May. Okay. The CSPA protection does exist, right? But I have written an article that explains how the CSPA protection for DV lottery operates. But basically what happens is there is a period of protection, which is normally the beginning of the entry period until the results date. And that period is normally about 216 days, around about that time. It varies a little bit year to year. That period is going to be condensed. So I don't know for sure what the CSPA protection will be for entries that we see in DV 2027, right? However, the protection period doesn't always cover everybody anyway, because it depends when your child turns 21. But if they turn 21 with the added protection period included, with the protection period included. So let's say it's in a year where there's 215 days. So your kid would be 21 plus 215 days. You have to get current before that date, right? And if you're current after that date, then you're out of luck. So if at the DV 2027 or any entry period time, your kid is very close to turning 21 at that time, then we have to do some math, and it has to consider your case number, and it is possible that child will be aged out before you actually go through. But what the math will be, it's too complex to figure out right now because we don't know all of those things, right? So I don't want to deal too much in the hypotheticals. But if you Google the words Brit Simon, child turning 21, right? you'll find my blog article about that. It's pretty informative and it's accurate. Okay, so by all means, have a look at that. Uncle Simon, I had an interview in January and I got 221G, but now they're asking for the I-134. Is it possible they will ask me for it? Look, they have always been asking for the I-134. But again, some of you are very confused. I didn't wake up on the wrong side of bed this morning. I'm not quite sure why I'm so grumpy, but I do get grumpy at some of these sort of questions. I've tried to explain before, the public charge rule is not a new thing. The fact that we're talking about I-134 is not a new thing. Again, if you go and Google the words Brit Simon, you put the word Brit Simon in Google and it sort of understands you want to know about me, right? So Brit Simon, public charge, right? And you'll find an article which is titled something like "All About Public Charge on the I-134," something like that. Actually, Google the words Brit Simon, public charge 134, and you'll find that article was written in 2014. Okay, that's when I wrote the first version of that article, meaning this thing that people have suddenly realized there's a thing called the I-134, and the public charge is part of the whole process and everything else. That's not new. That's always been the case. And I wrote a bloody article about it in 2014. So how did I do that 12 years before you heard about it, right? So it's not that it's new. In fact, what is new is that the government recently published an internal memo saying that they were not going to rely on the I-134. However, some embassies have increased their use of the I-134 just recently. So there is this whole concern these days about public charge. And again, this is something that happened in the first administration. And the 75-country pause is about public charge. But the fact that public charge has to be considered in all immigration cases, that has not changed. And the fact that it's considered in DV lottery cases is always been the case, right? So you do need to go to your interviews prepared to answer the question, how are you going to support yourself in the USA? And if you're smart and you've listened to some of my comments, you'll also know that you should have gone on to healthcare.gov, found a quote for healthcare insurance in the USA, and then demonstrate that you understand that it's going to be expensive to live in the USA and to get healthcare insurance, and that it's your responsibility to do that, right? And so, that's how you avoid getting refused on public charge basis. You prepare and you go into the interview having a little bit of knowledge. Okay, that's how you do it. Okay, is it possible that they will ask for it after your interview? It's possible, but it's rare. It's normally asked for in the interview, but sometimes they can follow up with it. So, they may contact you, but if they do, just give them a good plan, right? Hi, Simon. If the lottery starts in the middle of April, will the results come out in May or the summer months in order to make it in time for October 26th? In their November the 5th announcement about DV 2027, when they said that they do intend to run DV 2027, but the dates will be changed, they said the entry period will be changed and the results period would be changed, right? It won't be early May when they issue the results. So because of this new rule that's going to be effective from April 10th, let's say the entry period runs from, I don't know, mid-April to mid-May, something like that. They would then have to have an accelerated process to pick the winners, do all the checking they can, all the fraud verification and holification, creating holes, rejecting some of the winners based on photos and fraudulent entry and so on. They would have to do all of that work in a much faster time period than they normally have. But let's say they spend 2 months doing that, right? So if it's mid-May, we go mid-June, mid-July. So we'd probably be talking about announcement of results around about mid-July, maybe end of July, something like that. That's when you would be submitting your DS-260 for the first time, which more or less guarantees that there won't be very many cases at all scheduled in October, because people won't have submitted their DS-260s and had those processed in time, right? And so I think that this is leading to a couple of things. I would not be surprised if the government selects less people as winners in DV 2027, because if you select a lot of people and then and they all submit their DS260s, you've created a lot more work for yourself, right? And so I think they'll probably select a smaller number of winners if they've got any intelligence at all. But they should select less winners, maybe 80, 90, 100,000 rather than 130,000, right? And that would mean they get less people submitting the DS260s, and perhaps they try and prioritize them based on case number order so that they can get interviews starting in October and November rather than no interviews being done until, let's say, December or January or whatever. Okay, so we'll have to wait and see. Where it all, it's all just speculation right now, right? So we'll have to see. Simon, is Impact still onboarding for the last minute, or they reached the limit? Thanks. They didn't reach the limit. They're still onboarding, but for a few hours. But it's amazing you're asking the question on the very last day. Yes, come on, you're smart on that. You've asked smart questions before. Come on. What would be the forecast of the DV27 selectee notification period before the commencement of the fiscal year? Yeah, I've just always talked about that. You're welcome, Joe. How many KBs will the image need to be in JPEG? I guess. Yeah, in the document, the Federal Register document, it does talk about the specification, and it says it will have to be a JPEG. It specifically talks about the JPEG. It says that it cannot be a PDF, which is unusual. When we're talking about scans, that sounds like you're supposed to put it on a computer scanner, but I think it's going to be more sensible to take a photo, frankly, and that photo should then be a JPEG. It does talk about a limit of 5 megabyte for the size of that photo. So, but that's fine. That's fairly easy to achieve. I did have work with the developers on DV photo tools, and say, maybe we might have to implement some sort of little tool to help people verify that image. I think what's going to be important is that is machine readable, shall we say? That's probably the bad term, but that their AI process can look at that passport scan and can extract from it the relevant details, right? So that does mean you're going to have a certain sort of amount of detail in that photo, and that it should be clear and legible. I don't think we need to create that as a verification, but who knows? I mean, I'm hoping you can all figure that out, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have to do something. Since the cutoffs follow monthly global targets, and 52K visas look tough to hit, especially with AF and AS barely interviewing, we should expect a big jump in EU, right? Marco, I think that's true to say. We should get a pretty good jump in EU. Yes, they clearly have got a preference for EU cases compared to Africa or Asia right now. The numbers are very obvious what they're doing, right? And so, yeah, I think it would not surprise me if we see a fairly big jump on EU. And for me, a big jump is something between 25K and 30K, something like that. That's probably what it'll be. With Africa, I'm much more worried about embassy capacity than I am about the visa bulletin. But it would be nice to see a visa bulletin increase, because that allows the few embassies that are ambitious and make capacity available, that allows them to work. But also it means that adjustment of status cases can file. So I would like to see Africa increased, but there's very few interviews actually arranged over case number 34,000. Very few. Asia is interviewing well, but and is current. Asia is current, whether you understand that or not. When you're saying case number 35,000 is current, but actually the highest case number is 28,000, then clearly the region is de facto current. And there are interviews happening across the whole range. So Asia is sort of interviewing better than Africa. But a lot of those interviews in Asia are obviously are going to end up with 212F refusals, right? So that's obviously bad. Will they reduce the time frame of DV application 27 due to less time? They've got to run the entry period, I think, for 30 days. I believe that's a rule. I think it may even be mentioned in that Federal Register document. So it's got to be a 30-day period, I think. Let's see. Simon DV27 question: can my partner and I apply separately now and add each other later after our customary marriage in later 26? So yes, just be careful with this customary marriage thing. You have to follow the laws in your country. If a customary marriage in your particular country is legally applicable, then maybe that's okay. But in general, most countries where they have customary marriage also have a legal process. There's a legal marriage and a customary marriage. And if you live in a country like that, please do make sure you get legally married, even if that means a separate process or whatever from the customary marriage thing. But to answer your original question, yes, you can both apply separately. If you're married, you can both apply separately, right? But if you're married, you include your spouse. If you are unmarried, you both apply separately. So you've still got the same number of entries into the lottery period. You both can apply one time each, right? But then you get married. If you are selected, you get married, legally married, right? And then you continue. It is not necessary to lie about your marital status on the DV lottery process. Please don't do that. If you do that, you're a bloody idiot, right? And it doesn't make sense to lie. If you're a married couple, people often say you've got more chances of winning because there's two of you. Yeah, but as long as you're two human beings, you still have the same two entries possible, whether you're married or unmarried, right? And so you have one entry each, whether you're married or unmarried. And so it is not true to say that that you gain some sort of advantage by being married, and therefore you should lie about being married in order to get more advantage. Don't do that. That's a stupid thing to do. Just tell the truth in all times in this process, right? So in the entry period, only say you're married if you're legally married. Okay. Very important tip, that, because it's one of the easiest ways to get disqualified. You've asked that plenty of time. Will DV Photo Tool be working again? Yes, my developer right now is sunning himself in India, and lead developer, and he's working on that right now. But he's been extremely busy. He works in a Silicon Valley company that you would all know. You would instantly recognize the name of the company he works for. So he's my partner on this thing, and about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a problem with the certificates, and frankly, neither one of us had any time to deal with it. But it wasn't important because the entry period wasn't open. But he's going to have the site back up and running before March the 23rd, because that's when he's coming back from India. So while he's in India, he'll be doing that work. Okay. Can I use my credit card to pay for my relatives? Yes, you absolutely can. Hi, Uncle Simon. Since there is no lawsuit covering AOS, Charles and Jesse both said that they would cover AOS, and this is another frustrating thing. Although I have to admit, I'm frustrated with Impact over not making that more clear in the discussions. So I asked Charles in the March 4th video. This is March 4th. Charles Cook, if you look up Cook Baxter on YouTube, he had a live video, right? And this was March 4th. And in the middle of that video, you'll see me asking a question about AOS. And Charles said that they would do AOS. And Jesse, in one of the interviews with me, said they would do AOS. And last week, he said he would do AOS. But the website says they're not doing AOS, right? The time to have asked this question directly to the lawyers was last week. Now you've got 1 day left, right? And so now you'll have to just sort of decide whether you register or not register with that in mind. In my opinion, and I don't speak for Impact, but in my opinion, I tend to trust Jesse's word and Charles's word more than I trust the website's word. But that's up to you, right? Since there's no lawsuit covering AOS, is there a possibility they might remove only the consular processing and continuing pausing for AOS? It's possible. Yes, that's a possibility. The announcement when the DV lottery pause was put in place came in two parts. The first was on, I think, a Thursday night. I'm pretty sure it was the Thursday night when Kristi Noem came out and announced that she was pausing DV lottery, and that affected DHS, which is USCIS, which is cases doing adjustment of status. The next day, and within a couple of days after that, Department of State clarified their position, and then the pause was put in place for consular processing, which covers everybody else, right? The vast majority of DV lottery cases are consular processing. About 95% of cases are consular processing in embassies across the water, right, in other countries. And only 5% are adjustment of status cases in the USA. It is therefore technically possible, if they don't include USCIS or a representative of USCIS in the lawsuit, that's how we could get into a slightly bizarre situation where consular processing is not blocked, whereas it is blocked in the USA for adjustment of status. But I think that that's an unlikely outcome. I can't guess every outcome, and I won't be accurate in every guess. But I think that's an unlikely outcome, frankly, personally. But there you go. Is it possible to play the DV lottery without including my spouse? It's possible, and it's a stupid thing to do. If your spouse is married to you and you decide to ignore the instructions where it says if you're married, you must include your spouse, you will get disqualified, right? Let's just be blunt about it. If you do that, you're an idiot and you'll get disqualified and you'll have deserved that disqualification. Because the instructions are so clear, and I'm so clear about this every year. I tell people very, very bluntly, don't do that. If you do that, you're an idiot. I can't make it more clear, can I? So don't do that. Don't lie. If you're legally married, you must include your spouse. If you have children, you have to include your children. There's no choice about that, right? It doesn't matter if those kids are off at school. It doesn't matter if you don't like your spouse at the moment. If you're legally married, if you're not technically divorced, you have to include your spouse. And if that means that she or he won't let you take a photo for the lottery process, then tough freaking luck. You're not in the lottery this year. That's as simple as that. There's no point in you entering the lottery on a lie. So don't do it. Okay, please, just be smart about this. Denny Pipia, Simon, good morning. Do you think that our lawyers in Impact will do their best to avoid the court decision that doesn't grant 221G their visas, but others, yes, like it was in the other court? There was a court decision apparently in Nevada that did not force the government to issue visas on 221G cases. The judge stopped short of telling the government what they had to do. That doesn't mean the government won't do that. It just means that they weren't told by the judge to do that. But yes, I think Impact and Red Eagle will be wary of that situation because it happened in Nevada. But Nevada courts are probably not as switched on with immigration cases and cases with the Department of State and USCIS and so on. They're not quite as switched on perhaps in that court as they will be in Washington, D.C., where these cases will be filed. And the lawyers will be careful about that, yes. Okay. What do you think is better, scanning passports during using the iPhone scanner or the usual computer scanner? Whichever way you want to do it. You're just going to have to create a JPEG, right? Do you think $1 on passport requirements affecting the number of registers for this batch? It will, yes. Both of those things are designed to reduce fraudulent entries, and so there will be some number of entries that won't be coming in because of those two things. The passport rule is particularly effective at reducing fraudulent entries, and the $1 rule may impact some people not being able to enter because they can't, they don't have a credit card or can't find a debit card they can use or whatever, right? So yes, it will reduce the number of entries. So remember, this is probably going to be less entries. It will probably be less selectees. In my opinion, they'll probably have less selectees. We'll have to see. But it could be one of the better years to enter because there'll be less entries, right? So in previous years, we've seen numbers of entries reduced from sort of 20, 25 million down to as few as like 9 and 10 million entries because of the passport rule. So yeah, we could see less entries. As we know, the 75 pause is based on public charge. So my question here is, will I be issued a visa if I can prove sufficiently that I will not become a public charge? No. Like, while the 75 country pause is in place, it's not a question of whether you prove that you're not likely to become a public charge or not, right? You're going to be given 221G. You're on pause regardless. Now, what can happen is that you'll go to an interview. The consular officer, who is in a heightened sort of concerned situation about public charge, they're refusing more cases than normal on public charge grounds. And that's a straight refusal, okay? So if they give you that refusal, they don't have to give you 221G. They can give you a refusal on public charge grounds, and that's a final refusal, okay? So, but on the other hand, if they don't give you that final refusal and you manage to show that you're not going to become a public charge, you don't get issued the visa from those 75 countries. You don't get issued the visa because, number one, you're still subject to the pause for the 75 countries. It does not. The pause doesn't say figure out whether someone should be should be a public charge concern, and if they are, refuse them. But if they're not, give them a visa. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything like that. There's no issuance of visas to people from these 75 countries because of the public charge concern, right? Until we figure that out. There's also the DV lottery pause, which is the other reason you're not going to get your visa right now. So no, you won't get it. Okay. Do you still stand by your saying if your country is in the travel ban, don't attend the interview? I'm scheduled for an interview. Generally speaking, yes, unless you're on the Impact lawsuit. The Impact lawsuit is going to try and achieve something for the travel ban people. They're going to try. Now, just because they're going to try, or they've said they're going to try, doesn't mean that they, number one, doesn't mean that they can guarantee to do anything. But number two, it doesn't mean they can guarantee to give it much of a try. But what they're going to try and do is get visas issued to people on the travel ban, the 39 country travel ban, with the idea that those visas can somehow be kept alive long enough for the travel ban to be removed, right? So it's a high risk strategy, but if you've got the financial wherewithal, then I would say yes, be on the Impact litigation lawsuit, and therefore go to the interview so you can get your refusal on the 39 country ban. You have to have that refusal, right? And then Impact will fight to get your visa issued, even though you won't be allowed to actually enter the USA. Not for the time being, anyway, not while the travel ban is in place. Now, who knows when the travel ban will be removed? I don't think the travel ban will be removed for the foreseeable future. I don't think it will be removed before the end of DV26, probably not before the end of DV27. But just because the travel ban is there doesn't mean that you shouldn't go through some of the motions. However, for some of you, the amount of money for the legal fees or for the entry for the DV fees is very high, and I don't want you wasting your money because it's like if you don't have the money, don't go to the interview if your country is on the travel ban list, right? That's basically my perspective. If you don't have the money, if losing those few $100s would be a serious impact to your life, then don't go, because it's not that likely to change. Even in the lawsuit, it's not a guaranteed win. Okay. A lovely grumpy uncle. That's exactly right. How can the temporary immigration ban for 75 countries be lifted, and how could it affect the DV lottery 27? I think I've covered that. How can one increase their chances of winning? By entering one time and following the bloody instructions, right? Just follow the instructions, please. Don't be a smarty pants. Don't think that you're smarter than the people running the lottery, etc. Follow the instructions. If you're married or you're single or whatever your marital status really is, then list it accurately. Don't say you're separated if you're not legally separated. And legal separation means that you've got to have gone to a court to achieve that legal separation. Don't lie about your marital status, first thing. Don't lie about your derivatives. Don't say you have no children when you have children. Don't say you have children when you don't have children. Don't enter a child on your application that is not your child, right? And when I say your child, it should be your biological or adopted or stepchildren. 3 types, right? If they're adopted, you should list them on your application whenever you adopted them. But actually, you'll only be allowed to include them in the process if at the time of your interview, they've been your kids for 2 years, right? Adopted. Legal adoption process, not they're my brother's kids and he died in the war and so I took over his kids. No, you've got to have gone through a legal adoption process. Stepchildren is something that catches people out. If you married someone who has children from a previous relationship, those kids are automatically your stepchildren. Okay, automatically. You didn't have to go through any adoption process or any legalization process. It's automatic, and therefore you have to include those stepchildren, whether or not your spouse is on good terms with them or their previous husband or previous partner and so on, right? And you have to have photos of those stepchildren. And if you can't get photos of those stepchildren, then don't enter the lottery, right? Simple as that. Don't enter the lottery. This lottery is not, just don't do it. Don't put yourself through that pain. I'll tell you what's worse than being told you mustn't enter the lottery. I'll tell you what's much worse. What's worse than that is you go through a whole period of time for a year or so and you think you've won the lottery and you're planning about living in America and you're all excited, and then you go and spend money on medicals, and then you spend money on the interview fee, and you spent all that money and everybody's really excited and your kids are looking at you and oh yeah, Daddy, we're going to America, that's great. And then you realize you're being refused because you didn't include your stepchild from a previous relationship, or you didn't include one of the kids, or you screwed up on the photos, and you get disqualified from the whole thing. All of you, the whole family, you and all the kids, and you have to look your family in the face and all of your friends and say, no, you're not going to America now, because you screwed up and you thought you were going to be able to get around it in the interview because you're a nice person, and of course you're going to explain to them that your kid, your stepchild, you've never met your stepchild and they're away at school and whatever bullshit, story you want to come up with. They're not going to listen. It's nothing to do with them. They are not interested in your excuses. There is a very set rule and they will just instantly disqualify you. But they won't disqualify you from KCC. They'll wait until you're sitting in the interview and you've paid all the money. Okay, so that's much worse. Okay, don't do it. Don't do it, people. How much should be the annual income for I-134? My sponsor has 3 beneficiaries, and there is me and my husband. How much should there be on the I-134? Okay, so if only there were a place on the internet where all this was explained in very simple terms for DV lottery candidates. Oh, there is. Google the words Brit Simon, I-134, affidavit of support. Google that. You'll find an article that explains it. Basically, in shorthand, I can tell you that, yes, your sponsor's family size plus your family size will be added together. So you're saying your sponsor has 3 beneficiaries. So his family size is 4, right? His or her family size is 4, right? Your sponsor has 3 beneficiaries, that's 4. And then there's you and your husband, that's 2 more. So that's family size of 6, okay? And then you look up the 6 on the federal poverty guidelines, and you take the 100% number, and it'll be something like, I don't know, about 40,000 or something, or 35,000, something in that region. Now, people often ask me, but my sponsor doesn't earn enough money. Can I get a second sponsor and they add together their income? No, that's just more poor people. You want one sponsor who earns more than the federal poverty guideline. And frankly, if your sponsor doesn't earn more than the federal poverty guideline, they are poor. They're very poor. The federal poverty guideline is a tiny amount of money. If you're making less than that, you're not in a position to help anyone else. Okay, so that's all explained in that article I told you to Google. Go and Google. Okay. Hi Simon, I registered today, but I don't have the methods of payment specified there. Then why did you leave it till the last minute, Kelvin? I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say really. Yeah, it's a pity you left it to the last minute, but you probably need someone else to give you their credit cards so you can sort of pay that, and then you pay that money. But I wouldn't have left this until the last day if I were you personally. But there you go. What about people? People from 75 countries are eligible to participate through this program. Yes, they normally are, but right now the 75 country people are on hold, right? On the pause. Hi, Simon Kick 27 question. Already answered that one. Roughly 40k annually. There you go. That's about what I thought it was roughly. Tell us more about DV27. What more to tell you, Violet? I know what else to tell you. What can I say? We'll have to wait for the announcement. There will be an announcement, which will be 1 to 2 weeks before the entry period. So I'm expecting that announcement to come out probably in about 2 weeks' time, maybe 3 weeks' time. And I'm expecting that mid-April or so we'll be doing, the entry period. It will probably begin about then. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, but that's just a guess. We'll have to wait and see. Have you seen the latest news about the lottery? What latest news? Please don't tell me about this stupid bill. Every I've already had questions on this. There's some guy who's in Congress who's floated a bill to remove DV lottery, and some of you are running around like headless chickens about it. This happens every session of Congress. I'm not kidding. Every session of Congress since I've been talking about DV lottery, which is since 2013. There has been at least one bill, sometimes two bills in sessions of Congress that are trying to remove the DV lottery. So I don't get excited about another bill that's trying to remove the DV lottery. I don't get excited when Trump, who does not make laws in this country, when Trump says he wants to remove the lottery. I don't get excited about those things because they're not likely to happen, right? A bill is just a bill. It's just a suggested bill. It's not the same as it having gone through committees, it having gone through both houses, and it being on the president's desk to be signed into law. All of that process takes a long time and is unlikely to happen. So, don't worry about that. Photo time is finally now, very close to finally now, yes. I know it's difficult to predict. When do you think the AF region cutoff will reach 85k at some point? Will the pause be lifted for all or only some of the plaintiffs? So I don't know. I'm not going to try and predict that. I don't know. It's difficult to predict, but you still ask me to predict it. I don't know. It'll be working again shortly. Regarding the passport rule, 2 questions. Is only the biodata page required, or is the signature page also required? Can I use a temporary passport if I don't have a regular passport? Interesting. First question. So the way it reads, we'll have to wait for the instructions, but the way it reads, it seems like they will want one photo, but maybe there'll be a place where they have 2 photos. And in some passports, maybe there's a signature page which is different to the page that has all the biographic information, right? We'll have to wait and see, right? We'll have to wait and see what the instructions say. Can you use a temporary passport if you don't have a regular passport? I don't know about that. If it really is a true passport that would allow you entry into all sorts of other places, not one of these localized passports like in West Africa, there's a type of passport that only allows entry into, I think, 5 or 6 countries. It's sort of a local thing. That's not the sort of passport that's suitable for this process. You need a proper international passport. I don't know every single country's versions of passports. I don't know which country you're from, so I don't know whether your temporary passport is good enough or not. It's difficult for me to answer. Should I join Impact lawsuit if USCIS scheduled my interview in April, so I'm not impacted by any delay for now? DV26 winner. It's up to you, Artem. It's up to you. Really, it is. And you've got a few hours to make that decision. Really up to you. I mean, if you're already in the USA, $750 is not a lot of money, right? It's like 2 or 3 meals at a nice restaurant. So, personally, I would do it. If you've got the money, I would probably do it. But it's up to you. Oh no, I've lost my badge number 3. Is there going to be double entry for the lottery? No. Is there going to be a double entry for the lottery? What do you mean a double entry? No, you're not allowed double entry. You're allowed to enter yourself, and your spouse is allowed to enter, but no double entries. You can't enter more than one time. You'll be refused. And by the way, people that have used agencies in the past, and those agencies continue to enter them. Those people need to contact those agencies and make sure they've got the photo of the passport and everything else, right? You need to use one of the good agencies, if any agency, but in general, don't use the agencies. That's my beautiful daughter just saying good morning. It's so cute. Aren't they have to select a certain amount of people as DV lottery winner? I'm asking because you said they might decrease oh my God, you're sending my dyslexia into outer space. The number of winner to decline the amount of work for the embassy. Yeah, no. So there's no rule that says they have to issue all the visas, right? There is no rule that says they have to issue 55,000 or in this year 52,000 visa. First rule. There's no rule that says they have to over-select. So no, there's no rule that says they have to select 100,000 or more people, because some of those will drop out, and if they don't select enough people, they might not be able to give away all the visas. There's no rule about that, right? So no, there won't be. There is no rule about that. Okay. If I'm studying at university, which is better to choose, DV27 form, high school diploma, or some university courses? Well, let's work this through. Let's think about this, shall we? If you're studying at university, when you say studying at university, do you mean like you've done some university courses? Like some, right? If only there was a selection on the form that actually described that situation. So if you've been at university and you're studying some courses, then probably some university courses is a good answer for you. If you arrived there last week and you haven't studied some university courses, then feel free to say high school diploma. It doesn't matter a damn either way. It literally doesn't matter. There is no difference in your chance of selection or any of the rest of the process on whether you answer high school diploma or whether you put some university courses. No difference. There's no difference in any of that. That particular question is purely a demographic collection tool. It's nothing to do with your eligibility to participate in the lottery, nor your chance of being selected. They do not select people who are more highly educated, for example. That's not how it works. It's a random draw, okay? Hello, DV23, AF 50,000. We really appreciate all you do. We'd also like you to set up a live with Zarthisius. We could also thank him for his excellent work. It's funny, Zarthisius and I have never actually spoken face-to-face or on a live or anything else. He and I have been talking since, I think, 2017, so a number of years. And, we've gone back and forth, but actually I've never even heard his voice. So he's a mystery. He's a mystery man. And I've sort of hinted that he might want to come on a live sometimes, but he's never taken me up on that offer. But it is an offer I'll put out there. I'd love to meet him and have you all meet him as well. So thanks for asking about that, though. The mysterious man. Do you stand by your saying if the country has travel? I've already answered that. Passport is needed, yes. Does it look like this ban on 75 countries will be lifted soon? So no, I mean, I should probably have sort of dealt with that a little bit. I've become more negative leaning, I think, towards the government removing the pauses without the lawsuits. I think that's probably where I've got to. When the lawsuits were originally announced, I didn't want people to sign up immediately because I wanted to give as much time as possible to the government to remove their silliness, right? But we're now past 60 days, and I think, I was prepared to say that 30 days was a reasonable length of time to pause the DV lottery. I was prepared to say that. I was prepared even to go along with 60 days as being a reasonable length of time. But once you get above sort of 60, 70, 80, 90 days, once you get above those days, the pause to me looks very definitely arbitrary and capricious, which is the legal definition needed to take action against it. And so, looks like they're not going to remove it of their own volition. They might still, but looks less likely than it looked, let's say, a month ago. So, the lawsuit's still there if you want to join up. There have been reports about the construction of a center in Atlanta. which could be the reason for the pause. And if they're building it, is pause timeline might be unlimited. Is it possible? Not really. You're putting 2 plus 2 plus 73, and you're coming up with 1,568. You're adding a bunch of things together. It is true that they announced in December, I think it was, that they were going to be doing more background checks. I think it was early December they announced this. I don't know why the current discussion is going on right now. This was from early December. They announced that they were going to have a more capable background checking center, which they were going to establish in Atlanta. And that background checking facility was going to check immigration cases using all the modern technology and all the latest tools like AI, right? Now, it takes 5 minutes to establish a center, but it takes a lot longer than 5 minutes to establish all the technology that it takes to put all that together to make that a useful tool, right? Even with AI, we're moving very, very fast with AI these days, but we're not moving in 5 minutes. So it's going to take some time. They are not able to stop the whole of immigration stuff while they put that together. And no, that's not the reason for the pause. It might be one of the things that was in the back of their minds, but it's not the justifiable reason for the pause. And the lawsuits will probably prove that. They'll seek the administrative record for how the pause was discussed and decided. And so if there was an email from somebody that said, hey, we've got to pause the DV lottery because we're doing this Atlanta thing, I very, very much doubt. I very much doubt that email exists. I don't think they're connected. But you feel free to think whatever you want to think, right? Could the passport rule and the $1 fee boo? I don't know what you mean. They're both coming. The passport is needed and the $1 fee will be needed. Yeah. Do you think the DV program will be around in the coming years? Yeah, for the time being. I think the long term, like if I said, would we still be talking about DV lottery in 10 years time? I think maybe not. Will it still be around in 5 years time? Yes, I think it will be. I think it takes longer than a few years to come up with legislation. And this government is not the fully functioning smart government that it would take to negotiate a sort of a new set of immigration policies that was acceptable to both sides. Once the midterm elections comes around, the government will be pretty much hamstrung in what they do. The Dems won't agree with the Republicans on many things, and especially on immigration. Dems will be in charge of certainly the House, probably the Senate, or possibly the Senate, not the presidency. But you have to have all of those in agreement on something in order to pass new laws, and that's not likely to happen. So we're probably going to be in a stalemate situation for some years. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe in 10 years' time, maybe we'll get some sort of change, but not much before then. Aren't they have to? No, you already answered that. My passport biography page is the same page where the signature is, while the top page is just mere notes. Is it necessary to scan both or just the biography page by folding the passport? I don't know. We'll have to wait for the instructions. Let's just wait for that. Do you think there's a possibility that Republicans could successfully push through a new law that would end the DV lottery and replace it with merit-based system? No. Quite simply, already discussed that. No. Could passport rule and $1 fee boost selection chances? Yes, because less people will enter, and therefore your chance of selection will increase, depending on how many they select. Of course, if they select a lot less people, then there's less selectees out of a smaller pool. So, but yes, it could increase your chances a bit. When the impact litigation could be filed to court, I think it's on the 21st of, like in a week's time. That's what they're aiming for. It doesn't really matter if they hit that date or don't, to be honest. But that's roughly when they're planning to file, as I understand it. Can I still apply for DV, I think you mean, if I have my IR2 pending for interview in a paused country? Yes, you still can apply. In immigration matters, you're allowed to have multiple immigration applications going at the same time. There's no problem with that. Do you think that there is any correlation between the opening of DV27 and lifting the pause for DV26? No. why they opened the new fiscal year if they didn't finish the security checks. Again, I don't think there's any correlation. Many of you have correlated that in your own minds, but there is no reason to think those things are correlated. You've just not been listening to what I've been saying. I've been saying for months they're not correlated. So, so yeah. Okay. And you're about to see the proof of that when the DV27 is announced, as I believe it will be, and the pause is not by that time taken out, then that's proof of what I've been saying all along. Okay. Applied from 2 days, and I advise who need to apply now. Yeah, thank you for that. What's the final piece of advice you can give before you sign up for the DV lottery? Just tell the truth. Just make sure you've got a good photo. Make sure you tell the truth about your details. Make sure you tell the truth about your marital status and your derivatives. Make sure you tell the truth and that it should match to the place of birth on your passport. Right? Just make sure you tell the truth. Okay. Oh man. Let's see. I can subscribe. Is your DV photo tool better than the one from Department of State? Of course it bloody is. It's down right now, so it's been reworked, but you'll see when it's back. But yeah, it's like, yes, I mean, it does all the work for you in one step for a start. That's the first thing. It uses the latest AI technology to try and figure out whether your photo will pass or not. Now, it can't do a perfect job about that. Because as Arthesius and someone else sort of proved, you could probably take a picture of a monkey and get that approved by the DV photo tool, but it would also be approved by the State Department's own photo tool. But the photo tool that the State Department have is really only a cropping tool. It doesn't help with anything more than that, whereas mine does do that cropping. It also removes the background. It also checks your photo against all of the rules in DV Lottery. So it does all of those things. And it does it all in one step. So yeah, of course, my tool is better. Why would you ask? Like, come on. I know you called them, Simon, but when I wanted to say they're joined, they're not doing. Okay, yeah. But you spoke to some. Did you speak to Charles, or did you speak to Jesse, or did you speak to some, assistant that is just reading the webpage that you could have read? That's what I think you did. You spoke to some assistant. You didn't get an answer from the horse's mouth. And you've heard the answer from the horse's mouth if you've been listening to the March 4th video that Charles Cook did. He said it right there. He addressed it right there. Jesse addressed it in 2 of my videos. It's up to you. Is there a chance that the Europe region could be reopened earlier than the others? Europe is only on pause without a ban or public charge concerns. Could their goal to be process most of euros or Europe? There's a possibility that the government could remove the DV lottery pause, which would free up most of Europe, whilst leaving in place the 75 country pause, for example. That could happen. They wouldn't do it for the region necessarily, but it sort of would de facto mean that most of Europe is okay, whilst Africa and Asia are heavily affected by the pauses, right? The 75 country pauses and the travel ban. So, I mean, anything's possible. I don't know. Every time someone says, is it possible that, unless you're asking things about laws and all that sort of stuff, in general, most of these combinations about these pauses are possible. They could remove the 75 country pause and not the DV pause. They could remove the DV pause and not the 75 country pause. The lawsuits could achieve removing both the pauses or just one of the pauses or none of the pauses, right? All these things are possible, right? We just have to wait and see. I applied 3 times. That was my 4th attempt. I'm a 20-year-old high school graduate from Nepal. What do you think? I win EDV lottery or not? I don't know. I have no idea. I was given 221G at March 4th. My case last update was changed to March 13th. They are taking a look at those cases and adjudicate whether those case merits issuance and move them to usable pool or else. No, they're not doing any of that. So your case is on 221G, right? you will notice that cases get updates on the SEAC database. There will be updates from time to time. If you email them, for example, and ask them a question about your case, there will be an update recorded on your case, right? Because you emailed them. But also there's some other updates on your case that we have no idea why they did that update. You can't figure that out. There's no way you can figure that out. And so it's best to try and just ignore those updates because they don't mean anything. There is no magic number of updates you have to have on your case before you can be issued. There is no reason to think that them updating your case is about to mean that you'll be issued or that the pause is going to be removed. Don't jump to conclusions when there's no basis to jump to that conclusion, right? It was just out of curiosity. Okay. More chances on paper, only God knows though. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, if God entered the lottery, I'm sure he'd probably win, right? 221G is the white paper interview, DB lottery. How much do they? I don't know. Has there been any publicity date for DV27? If yes, when? Yes, they haven't publicized the entry period. They've publicized the rule that clears the way for them to do the entry period. Okay, we now have both rules. They're set rules. The passport rule and the $1 fee rule. Both of those are now set. I wrote an article on my blog about this week, or yeah, I think it was this week, Monday or Sunday. Actually, funnily enough, I wrote an article, and then within 24 hours, they published the Federal Register thing. It's almost like they're subscribers to my channel, and that my whining about DB27 calls them to publish the Federal Register. But anyway, yeah, you can go and look on my blog, BritSimonSays.com, and I think my latest article on there is about DV27. And it mentions in there that the Federal Register was published this week, but it also makes clear that the announcement of the dates has not been done yet. Okay. DV26 winner question. If I'm from one of the 75 countries, but USCIS scheduled my interview for April 15th, can I join the Impact lawsuit? Technically, they're not poisoning anything for now, but they will. EU. Artem, I think I already answered that. It's really down to whether you could afford the money or not, right? It's up to you. Yeah, this is Lena. I took a photo for the DV lottery last September. Do I need to have another photo taken, or can I still use the one I have? Unfortunately, you'll probably have to take another one. The only good news I can give you is that if you do a DV photo for DV27, it will probably be good for DV28 as well. It looks like we're going to get 2 entry periods within a 6-month period. It's possible that happens. So maybe that's a possibility. But yeah, for the sake of another couple of bucks or whatever, just get another photo, but just wait for the announcement of the results, would you? Right? When I scan my passport, do I need to scan both sides? Oh, I think we've already done that. Hey, are they? No, already asked that question. Good old racism, absolutely. It's what America is all about, apparently. 221G, I've already answered that. Can I enter my child who is out of wedlock? Yes, you must. That child is your child, right? Okay, so the fact that you're not married to your partner is nothing, nothing about that. So, if you're a married couple and you've got one kid, you would typically both enter, and each one of you would list the spouse, your spouse, and the child, right? If you're not married, then both of you can still enter, but you only each, if you're entering together, if you're still in this wonderful relationship and unmarried, you would both still enter. You would both list the child. The man and the woman would still list the child, right? And because that's your child, that's your biological child, right? Now, if you're unmarried, but your partner has children from a previous marriage, then those children must be listed by your partner, but not by you, because they're not your stepchildren yet. Stepchildren relationship is created by marriage, legal marriage, right? And so in that scenario, you would not list the stepchildren, okay? You have to be careful about that. You have to, use the smarticle particles up top, okay? Hope all is well. Kindly enlighten the masses about the new DS55014 form. I viewed one from EBM Scholars. I did a video on this several months ago. I don't know why EBM is sort of, well, I do know. EBM likes to get hits. I think he's trying to get all of his income from YouTube income or something. I'm not quite sure. I can't imagine it's enough, but maybe if he's got low expenses, maybe it is. So yeah, he just likes to sort of I saw his videos the other day. It's like, yeah, DV27. He's all on that, and he'll do videos about DV27. But the form was made available a few months ago, and I did a video on it. I showed how the form will look. But now we might as well just wait for the real form, right, to see the final version. There's no point in going through another sort of speculative thing on what the form could look like. Let's now see what the form does look like. Okay. There is chance of people waiting for approval. Yeah, there's chance. Yeah. Is the visa program cancelled? No. Would you generally assess the situation before the midterms? Do you think they might ease their policies a bit for a while, or do they already know they won't win and they see no point in trying? Well, we're doing Operation Epic Fury right now, right? Which is like Operation Epstein Fury, right? This whole thing is pretty much either, well, I won't go on about the politics of it, but it clearly is a distraction. The negative consequence, though, Trump and Netanyahu have gone into Iran and destabilized that area. That area is where a lot of the world's oil come from. So oil prices are going up, have gone up tremendously, and therefore gasoline prices, have gone up tremendously at the pump in America and all around the world, right? That impacts the economy. The economy was already on shaky ground, and there's a lot of bad news economically. The jobs market is pretty bad right now. The output, the GDP is not growing. Oil prices are going up. Inflation is going up. Tariff policy has increased prices for consumers. All of those things are bad news. Then you add on top of that the fact that the government can't seem to tell the truth about anything. And you assess their behavior on ICE and what they did in Minnesota and so on, killing US citizens, putting people in prison with green cards and even US citizens. I mean, it's just some of the stuff they've been doing is insane, stupid shit. So there's a lot of bad news for the current administration. And that's I think it's almost unlikely. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine them improving that before the midterms, which means the Democrats are going to have a massive win in the midterms, probably, and will take control of the House of Congress, the House, and possibly the Senate. And that will effectively sort of restrict the government's ability to push any legislation through. It will hamper Trump's strength and ability, but it's exactly what they deserve. They've managed things so badly. It's just hard to imagine them doing things worse. Frankly, it's been a bad year. So there you go. Let's see if I can take a couple more questions, then we'll call it a day. Shotgun Saturday runs from Uncle B today. Yeah, Saturday rants. You love my rants, don't you, Confusion? I love it. DV24 winner, but I didn't get to the interview. But am I allowed to join any lawsuit? No. When the year ends, your chance is gone, right? So if you were a DV24 winner, but you can't, there's no point to you joining any lawsuit. If you want to pay a lawyer to argue for you, I mean, they'll take your money, of course, but there's no real point in you doing that. There's nothing that can be done with your DV24 win. It's gone. The chance went on the 30th of September 2024 if you're a DV24 winner. Beyond that, there's nothing further you can do. Okay. What are the chances of being called for interview with case number 87K, which is Africa, of course? And when will the latest visa bulletin be updated? The VB wasn't published this last week. That should have been another thing I talked about in the news at the beginning. Wasn't published. I think it'll probably be published on Monday, maybe Tuesday. I have to wait and see. Your chance of being interviewed with 87K depends on your embassy, frankly. If you look at all the data, which we have, you'll see that no interviews, or almost no interviews above 34,000 have been scheduled so far in Africa. That's a big problem for you at case number 87K, right? So it depends on what happens now with embassies. There are 5 visa bulletins left for scheduling. It's hard to imagine how some of these embassies get from, they've currently reached into the 20s and 30,000 range. How do they get to 87,000 range? It's very risky for you, but it depends on which embassy you're at and how they behave. Okay. I'm sorry, I hope it works out for you. Uncle Simon, the consular officer requested an affidavit of support and relevant tax documents. What are these tax documents? They are tax documents from the person who signs your affidavit of support. The affidavit of support that you use is the I-134. And supporting that should be a tax return from the most recent available year, or a W-2. And these are documents that the sponsor will give you that they have, right? As well as the photo ID and recent pay slips as well would be good. All of that from the sponsor. Okay, so that's what you want. Trump doesn't care. No, he doesn't care. That's true. Can Indian with European permanent card holder please join? No. If you're born in India, you're not eligible for the DV lottery. There's way too many Indians already there, right? Oh, I did some math this week. Did I show that on the video? I don't know. I did. I did some math. Let me show that. Oh, I'm not sure I have that. Darn it. No, I'll have to come back to. I did a calculation this week on the immigration flow from various countries. I was trying to figure out whether which countries would be included in DV27. UK, I think, will still be included in DV27, and actually, according to my numbers, probably will continue to be included in DV28 and 29. And I'll show the numbers. I'll talk about this. I'll do a separate video about this to show how I calculate all of that. But there's another couple of changes that might hit us in DV27. The problem is the DV lottery statistics aren't being published. That's one thing. But also the yearbook of immigration statistics has not been published for 2024. And that yearbook contains numbers we need to make the final determination about numbers of which countries are going to be eligible for the lottery or not. It's possible, by the way, that might be one more reason that they delayed the entry period. It's possible. They are making so many mistakes. When Doge went in January, February of 2025, and they fired a bunch of people, they fired people who got proper jobs to do, who got actual jobs to do, and they've made themselves, they've put themselves behind in terms of doing some of the things they're supposed to do, like publishing immigration statistics. They're supposed to do that, and they haven't done it. And those statistics are actually part of the law that says which countries are eligible to participate in the lottery or not. So there's just one more problem they gave themselves. But I'm assuming that they have the data internally available, even though they've not published it. So I hope that's the case. Hi, Simon. A friend of mine was a DV23 selectee, and he mentioned that he wasn't asked for bank statements or Form I-134 in the interview. Are embassies in EU countries generally less strict? No. So in every interview, there's a person on that side of the desk, and there's a consular officer on this side of the desk. And that person on that side of the desk may have a very good job and be very well spoken and be obviously intelligent or obviously able to get a career in the USA, and therefore the consular officer may get a feeling about that person that that person isn't going to become a public charge. With other people, it may be harder for that person on that side of the desk to prove that, even if they are still very intelligent and still very competent and still very likely to get a job, right? In the latter case, the consular officer is more likely to ask for proof that that person isn't going to become a public charge. But just because your buddy wasn't asked for public charge stuff, that doesn't mean you won't be, right? It doesn't mean that somebody else won't be asked for that, even at the same embassy. So don't make the mistake that some people have in the past, that they think they will never be asked because their friend was not asked. Don't make that mistake. Everybody should prepare for being asked that question about public charge. And the question is phrased in various ways. It's not a clear question. They won't say, are you going to become a public charge in the USA? They'll say, can you explain to me your financial ability to support yourself in the USA? Or what work do you expect to do in the USA? Or where are you going to live in the USA? Have you looked into health insurance costs in the USA? They'll ask questions like that are roundabout questions that are probing at whether you will become a public charge or not. Okay. In some cases, they will bluntly say, I need to see your bank statements. I would need to see an I-134 or whatever it might be. They might be that blunt, but not in all cases, because they've probably asked some questions that gave them a comfort feeling about you, right? So it'll be different for every person. Okay. Now there are some embassies that tend to ask more often than others. There are some embassies that very rarely, almost never ask for I-134s and so on. But you can't take that as a golden rule that will always apply either way at every embassy. Okay. Okay. So before the end of the live, can we share the link for the Impact, because many cannot communicate with them. I put it in the YouTube description for this live. It's right there. I'll put it in. Let me get it again, because you seem like you need it. Yeah, so what's good? I'm sure you're asking for other people, right? Which I appreciate. Let's see. Right, this is the Impact Litigation link. I'm putting it in the chat now, and hopefully you can use that. Okay, a couple more questions, then we'll call it a day. Okay. I think Trump wanted to frustrate us, so we will give up. Yep, maybe. I see repeat there here. Those who will win the lottery, DV27 will face a repeat of what's happening to those that have won DV26. He will delay again. Yeah, possibly. There's bad feeling from the government without a doubt. But don't forget the two pauses. Neither one of them came from an executive order or a statement by Trump. Trump has not commented on these, as far as I know. Has not commented on these two pauses at all. So there's no executive order. There's no proclamation from Trump on the pauses. It's purely an administrative action, which is a different thing for the lawyers to argue, right? No, I don't have an updated number of plaintiffs for Impact, but I'm quite certain it's above 100. But I'm certain it's above 100, and as I've said all along, they are going to file. So they'll file. Just looking for one more good question. That's probably about it. Okay. Oh, one last question. Montreal or Warsaw? What's your opinion about which embassy would be reliable and efficient to process EU DV case? Did you ask me? I think you may have asked me this question on the blog. Maybe somebody else. Yeah. So yeah. How do you weigh up between Montreal and Warsaw? Now, there's pros and cons to every embassy. We don't have the data this year that lets us see how backlogged each individual embassy is. So it's a bit of a riskier decision this year than it is in most years, right? Or than it has been in recent years. We normally had data to show whether one embassy or the other was backlogged or not. My impression is, I think, neither one of those embassies is backlogged. It's my impression based on information I've heard from people, but you are welcome to try and search for information about others that have been scheduled at those embassies, right? Montreal has been a bit more difficult in terms of the use of the form called DS5535. So over the last couple of years, they've been a bit more quick to use that form, which asks for more background information, and it's a way that they do additional background checking after the interview. So they've been a little bit more like that, whereas Warsaw is pretty straightforward. But that could change, right? So I guess if I would mostly say, look, do the one that's nearest to you where you live, right? And assuming that you have legitimate reason to ask for either one, but don't leave it till you're current to make that decision. You have to make that decision before you're current, otherwise you'll get locked into one embassy or the other. Okay. And I'll just take this as the last question. I suggest your website get some sort of tool questionnaire. Once answered, it shows docs list for DV. There is tools on there. It's so funny people ask me to do this. There's a FAQ on there, FAQ FAQ. There's a FAQ. There's also a search facility. You can search for things on my website. There's a search right there. There's a little magnifying glass search. There's also Google that searches my site, and you can help yourself find information on my site by using Google. But you mentioned specifically the docs list for DV. I've always stayed away from that because, number one, that docs list is talked about in the official instructions, and you should all have read the instructions. And number two, I don't want to give the impression that when I give a list of documents that that's the only documents you need, right? I don't want to be responsible for that list of documents because the list of documents is specific to each individual case. Some of you will have been married, some of you will have been divorced. You need documentation for those things, right? Some of you will have, you should all have a birth certificate and a passport. Some of you will have to provide education documents. Some of you will be asked for financial documents, right? So I don't want to give lists of documents that some people will take as the only list. I've always said, please read the instructions and figure out what documents you need for your case. It's very clear. If you just read the instructions, it's very clear. And there is a sort of a shortened list of documents that every person would need, which is the bare minimum is you need your birth certificate, you need your passport, you'll need your marriage certificate if you're married. You may need a divorce certificate if you were previously divorced or if you're currently divorced. You need kids and derivatives documents for those same things, right? And you'll probably need police certificates. Certainly if you are outside of the US, you're not doing adjustment status, you'll need police certificates, right? But which police certificates you'll need, you have to consider that for your particular case, okay? All right, everybody, I hope that covers it. Thanks for your questions today. Thanks for spending your time with me this morning. I appreciate it. And let's hope we see some good news about DV26 coming up soon and about DV27. I'm hoping that we're going to have some good news to share over the next couple of weeks. We'll see. But the lawsuits, last opportunity. I've put the link in the chat there. So last opportunity to sign up for the Impact lawsuit is today. Up to you whether you do or not. But there's no point in complaining once the bus has left the station, right? All right, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye now.